Howdy! In this mini lecture we will discuss various types of protected areas, anthropogenic impacts to natural areas, and potential solutions to these impacts. The student learning objectives of this mini lecture are: recognize types of parks and protected areas and evaluate issues involved in their design, assess how human activities affect parks, describe and evaluate the Sloss dilemma, and identify the ecological value of environmental corridors. Federal, state, local, and international parks allow us to preserve functional ecosystems by designating certain areas as protected land. Globally, 12% of all land is under some sort of protection. People establish parks and reserves to protect and preserve vast or unique scenic areas, provide outdoor recreational opportunities and adventures, generate revenue from ecotourism, offer peace of mind, health, exploration, wonder, and other non-market values, protect ecosystem services, and to preserve biodiversity. The National Park Service of the U.S. was started in 1916 to manage both parks and monuments. Today, there are 401 sites managed by the National Park Service, which include National Historic Sites, National Recreation Areas, National Wild and Scenic Rivers, and other areas. National parks are just one type of federally protected area in the U.S. Another type of protected area is the National Wildlife Refuge. The National Wildlife Refuge system began in 1903 under President Theodore Roosevelt. Today, there are over 560 refuge sites covering 151 million acres. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service administers the refuge system. The activities that are allowed in refuge include hunting, fishing, birding, wildlife observation, photography, and education. One wildlife refuge that occasionally comes up on Capitol Hill is the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. This is the largest refuge in the system and home to some very sensitive ecosystems and species. It becomes a hot topic about every 10 years or so when it is proposed to explore drilling for oil and gas in this area. This area is also feeling the effects of climate change, as the areas near the poles are very sensitive to the effects of climate change. National wilderness areas are another type of federally protected land. Activities on these lands are even more restricted than some other types of federally protected areas. Specifically, the following things are prohibited in wilderness areas: roads and structures, timber harvesting and commercial enterprises, bicycles and other wheeled vehicles, mechanical transport, motorized vehicles and equipment, aircraft landings, removal of plants, stone, or moss for personal or commercial use, and removal of historical or archaeological artifacts. Let's do a review to test your knowledge of different types of federally protected areas. Which areas are off limits to all development? A. National forests, B. National parks, C. Wilderness areas, or D. Bureau of Land Management lands. The answer is C. Wilderness areas. Human activities have significantly altered the landscape. Specifically, agriculture, residential developments, roads, logging, and other activities divide natural habitats into small, disconnected fragments. These fragments are sometimes called islands of habitat. This is a problem because some species, like bears and mountain lions, need large, continuous habitats. Sadly, these animals are starting to disappear because they are unable to survive in habitats that have been reduced in size due to human activities. Another problem is that these small fragments may be too small and isolated to be recolonized by local species. Habitat fragmentation also creates what are known as edge effects. Edge effects are when environmental conditions such as wind exposure, temperature, light, etc. change along a fragment's edge. Think of it this way. The interior of a forest has different environmental conditions than the edge of the forest. However, if the forest is fragment, what once was an interior region of the forest now becomes an edge. Edge effects go beyond abiotic conditions. For example, parasites and predators easily attack bird nests on edges, and interior bird species may not be able to reproduce when forced near the edge of a fragment. Additionally, fragmentation is the main reason for decline of populations of North American songbirds. When designing ecological preserves, conservation biologists have argued about whether it is better to create one large reserve or many small reserves. This is called the Sloss dilemma. Scientists have been studying experimental forest fragments in the Amazon. They compared a variety of ecological measures between small, medium, and large fragments of forest. They found that Species were less likely to survive in smaller fragments, and species were lost faster in smaller fragments. Fragments that were far away from other continuous stretches of forest lost more species. Species adapted to the interior were threatened by even small gaps and openings in their fragments. Some birds were unable to navigate gaps between fragments that were as small as 100 and 260 feet wide. And bees, beetles, and some animals that reside in trees were unable to move from one fragment to another if the gap was even as small as 50 to 330 feet. One interesting research discovery that came to light through the Amazon sloth dilemma research was the idea of a corridor. Corridors are areas of natural, undisturbed, and protected land that allows animals, insects, and other organisms to travel between islands of habitat. Research indicates that reserves are most effective at preserving species if corridors connect them. A former student of mine has an insightful way of explaining this. Roads connect humans to each other, but they disconnect and separate wildlife from each other in their habitats. Corridors act as a way for wildlife to move safely through a landscape. The picture on the left shows what most corridors look like in the U.S. and many other countries. The picture on the right is an innovative example of a wildlife corridor over a freeway in the Netherlands. This is an inspiring example of what we can aspire to do. This concludes the mini lecture on protected areas, anthropogenic impacts to natural areas, and potential solutions to these impacts. Please review the weekly outline and complete the activities for this week per the schedule set forth in the outline. Thanks and gig 'em!